Good morning, everybody. Welcome. People are arriving as we come to the 8 o'clock hour here. I am going to be putting up a poll. Let's go here. It's got a couple of sections to it, just so that we can kind of get a baseline for everybody. I'm launching the poll here. And the first question in our poll series as everybody arrives is, how do you use the trails in Chester County? What barriers do you face in using trails or using trails more? What was the distance of your pre-COVID-19 commute? And how important is trail accessibility in your current or future choice of workplace or home? Ladies and gentlemen that are just joining us, we do have a couple of poll questions that are up. If you have the moment, please fill them out. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have a great set of speakers here. People are still arriving. To those that are arriving, we do have a couple of poll questions that are floating out there. Please take a couple of minutes here and fill that out. We're going to get started here very shortly. Well, we've come to that magical hour just so that we can stay on schedule this morning. My name is Tim Phelps. I get to be the Executive Director for TMACC, the Transportation Management Association of Chester County. I thank everybody for joining us today on our webinar to talk about the trail and trail development within our community here in Chester County. They are a vital part both for health and recreation, but they play a key part throughout the county for transportation purposes, providing alternative modes of transportation. We do have with us Brian O'Leary today to talk about some of the initiatives that the county is doing from the executive level. We have Sarah Clark Stuart with us from the Bicycle Coalition, but with her hat on from the circuit. She'll talk about some high-level things that the circuit is doing and then dovetail into Chester County. We also then have Brian Styche with us and Rachael Griffith, who will be talking about county projects in itself. Today's event is being recorded, so if you want to go back and see in a couple of days, we will have this posted up on our website. I ask that everybody remain on mute as we go through the process. Be prepared for some poll questions. We'll be asking questions through that along the way. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will have one session of a poll chat. That way, we can create some dialogue and we know what you're thinking, and we can ask those questions of our speakers as we go through. As always, sponsorship is really important to TMACC and putting on programs like this. Our sponsors today are you, our members. Membership is really important for TMACC, especially in this time. And I want to thank everybody that is on the call that is a member. And if you're not a member of the organization, please help us out and join us. Your membership dollars are great investments. They help us compete with some of the grant monies that we go after with PennDOT and other sources. So I appreciate that. So with that, I am going to close the poll question here. And there we go. Poll, I'm closing the poll. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating in that. And once we finish the event, we will, in a follow-up, we will share the poll results with everybody. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brian O'Leary. Brian, it's all you.
All right. Oh, great. Thank you, Tim. And welcome everyone to our presentation this morning by a variety of folks on trails in Chester County. And it's a topic near and dear to my heart. Try to get out on trails every weekend if I can on my bicycle with my wife, and always enjoy it. Last weekend wasn't Chester County, it was over in Delaware from Wilmington down to Newcastle. Great trail down there, and we want to continue expanding and improving our trail system here in Chester County. Just going to give you an update on a few things going on at the Planning Commission. First, I think everyone's probably aware that the county has a Restore Chester County website and a business task force that is working on addressing the crises we have going on right now related to the pandemic. And I encourage you to check out that website. We are going to be doing working with lots of different folks on some economic planning efforts, particularly with the Chester County Economic Development Council. So that's really an important effort. And as we all know, the pandemic has led to a big increase in trail usage, and you'll hear about that later on. I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everyone about the census. We have a Census Complete Count Committee that is pushing for census response. We're about 73.5% response rate at this stage. I think in 2010, we were about 75%, 75 to 76%. We're doing pretty well given that we got the pandemic and other things going on. But if you haven't filled out the census, or you know people who aren't, or you have an opportunity to share about it, please do. I wanted to mention that Landscapes 3 is really our framework on trails and on all the work we do. And at our July Planning Commission Board meeting, we will be having releasing metrics. How have we done over the first year or so of implementing Landscapes 3? Another thing I wanted to quickly mention is the county's created a new Environmental and Energy Advisory Board. They've met twice. We had a meeting this week, and currently working on a draft climate action plan that was created under a state program. And I think that the work on trails and on limiting the number of single occupancy vehicles really fits in very well with the mission of that group and some of the work that they're doing. Unfortunately, we weren't able to celebrate Earth Day the way that we had hoped, but we did produce to the Planning Commission a document called 50 Ways Your Community Can Protect Our Planet. And that's in the 50th, in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And it was divided into 5 sections. And one of the sections is called Discovering New Routes. And it really emphasizes what are some of the things we can do transportation-wise to improve our planet. And then I think you'll hear more about this from Brian Styche, but we are working on a active transportation inventory. We're looking at all 73 municipalities in Chester County and what they are doing for in their codes and their planning on active transportation, walking and biking, taking public transportation and getting to it. So really, that's just a quick overview, some things going on. You're going to hear lots more about trails from Brian Styche and Rachael Griffith from the County Planning Commission. And now I'd like to turn it back to Tim for another poll.
Thank you so much, Brian. I know that there's a lot going on in the county with the COVID planning and then outreach that you're doing with that. So I appreciate all the efforts in spending some time here with us today. I'll see if I can do this correctly. Here is the second poll question here. This one's a relatively simple one. Dovetails into our next speaker. Sarah Clark Stuart is with us today. And she wears the hat of being the executive director for the Bicycle Coalition. But then, like all of the executive directors, we serve on other boards and organizations, and she chairs the circuit. So she is going to talk a little bit about the circuit with us. So Sarah, it's all yours.
Thank you. I trust that. Good, great. Thanks everyone, and thanks for inviting me here today, Tim. I'm really pleased and very honored to be part of this panel. So I'm going to kind of run through an overview of what the circuit is and what the Circuit Coalition is up to here in 2020. So next slide, please. So the Circuit Coalition is a very robust coalition that has existed since 2012. We are a combination of advocacy groups, friends groups, but also we work very closely with municipalities and the counties and agencies who are all combined working together to piece together the circuit in our greater Philadelphia region, both in the 5 counties of southeastern PA and the 4 counties of New Jersey. So here in Chester County, you have the Friends of the Chester Valley Trail, you have the Brandywine Conservancy, you have Bike Chester County, among some of the organizations that are part of this coalition. So next slide, please. So just to give you an overview, and this is one of my favorite maps, which is a transit style map of the circuit and throughout the 9 counties and the 2 states. What's in green is largely built, and what's in blue is what needs to be built. So we have, this gives you a really nice sort of representation of how interconnected all of these multi-purpose trails are and how much more work we have left to do to build out this entire system. Next slide. So the status as of this past May, when we had a virtual semi-annual meeting, the status is that we have about 814 miles of the circuit in terms of what's planned and what's complete altogether. And 336 are built, so that's about 40%. We have about 75 miles that are in progress, meaning that they've had some sort of feasibility study, they are in a plan, and some sort of effort has been made and to start the process of building that particular trail segment, and it has the money, most of the money or a lot of the money to become built. Then there's about 95 miles that are in the pipeline. So they are they've had some sort of study done, but they don't have all the fully funding left. They still have a lot of money to raise to be able to be completely constructed. And then we have about 300 miles that still are only planned and basically are lines on a map, and they have a long way to go. So this, and just a quick note, this also includes some miles in Berks County, the Schuylkill River Trail. So next slide. So this is just again kind of an overview of what we have in the pie chart. We have about 42% built. We have 23% or so that are in progress and in pipeline, meaning they have, that's what really needs to be focused on to move to the green, and then about 35% that are further behind. Next slide. So back in 2013, I believe, when DVRPC, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, adopted its 2040 long-range plan, It incorporated the circuit as a significant regional bicycle pedestrian project and committed to try and build this by 2040. And at that time, the circuit was 750 miles. Next slide. It's now 814. And still the goal is to try to build it by 2040. That's the regional commitment. Now that sounds like a far away. 2040 seems still way out in the future. But we felt like in order to keep on track and to make sure that we have a chance of meeting that goal, we should try to have a regional goal, regional goal for what we would meet in the next 5 years or so. So next slide. So the Circuit Coalition itself, the advocacy groups have developed a campaign to try to get the region to get to 500 miles by 2025. Next slide. So that campaign is really kind of what we've been working on for the past 2 years, and are intensifying, we hope, over the next 5 years. So this is a map that shows the municipalities in the 9-county region that have adopted a resolution in favor of the region reaching that goal of 500 miles by 2025. Next slide. So what we've been focusing on in the past 18 months or so is how are we going to get to that 500 miles? So we know that, and that maybe the individual numbers are a little bit different, but effectively we have about 163 miles that need to be built in order to get to that 500 goal. Next slide. So what we have been doing is working very closely with county planners such as Brian and Rachael to really drill down and try to make sure we understand the status of each and every mile of each of every segment. This is a database that the Pennsylvania Environmental Council built that we helped feed information into, and also has supplemented what the DVRPC staff, Chris Lynn and Sean McGill-Gender, also have as their own database and their own map. Next slide. And what we were able to determine is that we know that there are about 77 miles in progress, meaning those trails are on their way, they're going to get built, don't have to worry about them too much. Next slide. But there's about 95 miles that are in pipeline, so they need money, they need support, they need right-of-way, they need advocacy, they need champions. Next slide. But together, that's about 171 miles, and that covers basically what we need to get to the 500-mile goal. Next slide. And that 95 miles that's in pipeline is about 45 segments. So that 45 segments is really what we're focusing on over the next few years in our campaign to reach that goal. Next slide. So we put out a report, this is the cover, that last fall, which we presented to both the Regional Technical Committee and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission Board, where we laid out the specific segments that we think will make the 500-mile goal, and also many policy recommendations. Next slide. There are 12 of them, and they range from, their recommendations directed at the DVRPC itself, the counties, the states and the state agencies, and then ourselves, sort of tasking ourselves with things that we need to do. But these are 12 policy recommendations that we think will help the region make that goal. Next slide. But we also listed out by county the specific segments that will also comprise those 45 segments that will get to the 500 miles. And these are the ones for Chester County. What's in the darker color are the trails that are in progress. So they are on their way, basically either have their funding or almost have all their funding. And it's the ones that are white that are not highlighted that need more work, more effort, more championing in order to get to get to the goal. Next slide. So what we had done as our own task is formed action teams in each county with chairs, action team leaders, and we have selected the particular segment that we want that the action team will be focusing on. And so Bob Dredge, who is also chair of Bike Chester County, is the lead for the action team for Chester County, and will be focusing on the Chester Valley Trail West, which has, I think we will hear a lot more about from Rachael and Brian, but this is a very significant piece in that it is a significant length, and that's going to be a very integral part of getting to the goal by 2025. And so we formed these groups and got them going just as the pandemic hit. So things have been in a bit of a, figuring out what to do in a virtual world. But the idea is to start bringing in interested members of the public who want to be a part of this, who want to take action, who want to put their oar in the water to try to help this particular segment get constructed. And that's what Bob will be doing over the next year or two or more. Next slide. And I think I'm almost done. So this is how we are going to be recruiting people to get involved. On the Circuit Trails website, we'll be directing people to take action, and then we will be reaching out to them to become more involved in this effort to focus on a particular the particular segment in Chester County, but also particular segments throughout the whole rest of the region. And I think that's it. Next slide. Yeah. So final word is we can do this. We can make it. We can succeed. We're excited, and we are. We really want we really hope that everyone will work together to make this goal and propel us towards building out the circuit completely in the next at least by 2040. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back to Tim.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate your efforts on this and leading the cause. Creating that regional network of trails is extremely important, especially when we look at transportation options for people throughout the region. I did post a couple of questions out there. What is your favorite trail in Chester County? What is your favorite trail within the region? And what are we missing? And so if you haven't put your thoughts in the chat, please do so at this time. I'd like to take a moment to step back here and just make a kind of a brief announcement. Maybe some of you have already heard this, but TMACC worked with Charlestown Township on a TCDI grant, which was submitted and then which was recognized, and now we're working into the contract. That TCDI grant will be looking at the overall management issues and structures of the DeVault Trail. And so since Charlestown had taken the lead to originally do the study, but there are several municipalities that it does travel through, it becomes one of those pieces of, well, who's going to own it, who's going to manage it, where's it going to go in the future. And so this TCDI study that we'll be doing will focus on those issues so that, when we're able to get the right of way, we know who is going to be responsible for that right of way and who that right of way can be given to. So we're kind of excited about that. With that, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Brian Styche. Brian leads the efforts for everything transportation in the county. And Brian and Rachael are going to kind of talk about, what is the policy and the vision, and then Rachael is going to be talking about what are some of the action things that are happening. So with that, Brian, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tim. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Great. Okay. I also like to thank Sarah for providing a great overview of the Circuit Coalition and their efforts to advance the development of the circuit in the region. What's just a little preview. I am going to be covering the overall vision and policy of this, and Rachael is going to be providing more specific updates on trail projects that are advancing the circuit in Chester County. One thing, just from a technological perspective, I think Rachel's having some connection issues. So if she falls out, I will just pick up for her and keep going. So just wanted to let you guys know about that. Again, I'm the Environment and Infrastructure Director. Rachael is the Trails and Open Space Planner. And, we've been working together with other partners in the county to advance the circuit system, as well as, members of the Circuit Trails Coalition. This image right here is more of a geographic map of the Circuit Trail system. What I'd like to focus on is the Chester County portion, which would be in the next slide. I do believe that so far as Chester County's commitment towards developing the circuit, we were the first of the regional counties to sign the resolution advancing, providing our support towards the development of this circuit trail system. We've not only done that in the form of resolution, but we've also made it policy as part of our recent comprehensive plan update for Landscapes 3. What you see here is our policy map relative to that circuit trail development. The Connect goal for Landscapes 3 is to advance efficient, reliable, and innovative transportation, utility, and communications infrastructure systems that responsibly serve thriving and growing communities. And the specific recommendation towards trails is to create a countywide interconnected trail network where we develop and implement a countywide network that includes the expansion of the circuit and connecting local trails. And what you see on this map is, again, the circuit trails primarily within Chester County, including the Chester Valley Trail, the Schuylkill River Trail, the Struble Trail, the municipal-owned East Branch Brandywine Trail. And in southern Chester County, you see a line on an east-west direction for a study we are currently doing in southern Chester County to identify a potential alignment for a circuit trail to serve our southern municipalities. As you may have known, as I'm sure as you all may know, we have a new administration, and with that we've had some new department heads. So we've been working and planning with other departments in the county. It's not just planning that moves these forward. It's we essentially have been doing the planning. We started this planning approximately 5 years ago with the realization that the county was running out of available right-of-way. Plans were already well underway toward construction of trails for right-of-way that we own, but we also were looking to identify the possibilities moving forward for where we may continue those trails and where they would be located. And again, Rachael will get into the specifics of those planning efforts in her portion of the presentation. But we've been working with the Department of Facilities and Parks, who ultimately does the design and construction of those trails, and also for the maintenance, and with Parks and Preservation, who does the patrolling and programming for those for the trails in Chester County. In addition, if you can go just back to that previous slide, please. One other thing I just want to note, while we are working on primarily the major spines of the circuit trails, we're also working with our municipalities to potentially identify connector trails, which are those green arrows pointing into the main spines of those trails. Right now, we're getting near the end of our active transportation inventory, where we are inventorying and reviewing and inventorying all of the municipal regulatory documents like zoning ordinances, subdivision land development, to identify how each municipality has active transportation elements codified into their ordinances. Because one of the best ways for these trail connections and other bicycle and pedestrian facilities to be constructed is through the land development process. And if there are ordinances in place, that critical elements of public infrastructure can certainly be developed a lot faster. Go on to the next slide, please. Just to touch upon the use of the trail, I think we've seen a steady increase in trail usage since each of these segments has become open. It becomes certainly more popular. We've again, seen a steady increase, and currently in this COVID pandemic, we've seen an almost doubling in certain situations. You'll note in these charts there are some outlying numbers. I think we have a resident spider that likes to trip the sensor and up our numbers, and I guess to make the support for our trails a lot better. But you can see, these are very popular facilities within the county, and we are looking to continue that development with a trail development strategy and moving a number of these projects forward as we'll get into in the next part of the presentation with Rachael. Next slide. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rachael if she's available.
I am. Thanks,
All right,
Brian.
great. Sure thing.
So like Brian said, I'd like to talk to you about the current status of the county trails, and also go a little bit more into detail about the overall vision for the trail for its future development. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So the first trail is the Schuylkill River Trail, because there's the biggest news with that trail. So this is a picture of the existing part of Chester County's Schuylkill River Trail that's in stone dust and looking east towards the Crombie Power Plant. And if you could go to the next slide, we are going to construction this year with a sort of two-part project that will fill one of the last major gaps in the Schuylkill River Trail between Reading and Philadelphia, which is really exciting. So one of those two parts is paving the stone dust surface that you saw in the previous picture. It's about 6 miles of existing trail, so that will be paved between the Phoenix-Villboro line and Parker Ford at Linfield Road. And then next slide, we'll be picking up with the big project, which is constructing about 4 new miles of trail to fill this gap between Parker Ford and the Montgomery County line, where the trail will cross the new 422 bridge over the Schuylkill River. This project includes 2 new trailheads, one at Fricks Lock and one at Parker Ford. And we're anticipating this will probably be finished construction by the end of next year. So next slide, please. Next is the Chester Valley Trail. So many of you have probably been on this trail. It's sort of the east-west connector route that's used for commuting and also recreation in the Great Valley area. So next slide, please. So we have a project that has been going on for quite some time that you've probably heard about before. We call it Phase 4A of the Chester Valley Trail. And it's a 1-mile extension of the current trail to the Oaklands Corporate Center, which you can see on the left side of the screen. And this would take the Chester Valley Trail to the end of the county's current right-of-way along the former Chester Valley Branch Railroad. So this project includes a bridge over Whitford Road, which has kind of held the project up. But we are anticipating that all issues are going to be cleared up very soon, and we anticipate going to construction with this hopefully this year. And next slide, please. So this is the Route 100 crossing that we have heard countless complaints about over the years. So many of you are probably familiar with when you are on the Chester Valley Trail and you get to Route 100 right by Main Street at Exton. The bottom diagram shows that you have to cross the road 3 times to continue on the trail. First over Commerce Drive, then over Route 100, and then back over Commerce Drive. And so we are fixing that situation and creating just a single crossing of Route 100. And this is being done in conjunction with the project that West Whiteland is working on, which is a connector trail between the Chester Valley Trail along Route 100 to the Exton train station. So it will actually create more multimodal connectivity in the area, which was very much needed. And so the trail, the connector trail to the train station is underway right now. And we're anticipating this intersection improvement will be done sometime in August of this year. So that is happening right now. And the next slide, please. And although this isn't in Chester County, lots of people have been wondering about this project. So after many, many years, Montgomery County is finally going to construction with the portion of the Chester Valley Trail that will connect the eastern terminus of the Chester Valley Trail to the Schuylkill River Trail. And the contract has been awarded. It's a $13+ million project to do about 3.7 miles of trail. They're having to do some serious infrastructure changes, and but in the end, it's going to be a continuous multi-use trail to the Schuylkill River Trail. So it's been quite a feat, and I know everybody's really excited to see this connection happen. So this is going to construction this year. And next slide. And so the Chester Valley Trail is really envisioned by Chester County to be a cross-county trail. And so we've undertaken at the Planning Commission a couple of different studies to figure out how to extend the trail farther west. And the first of those studies was completed in 2017, and it was the Extension to Downingtown study. And through that study, we identified a former rail corridor that is called the Philadelphia and Thorndale corridor, which we lovingly refer to as the P&T. And that's shown as the pink line at the bottom of the map. And so the plan for extending the Chester Valley Trail farther west to Downingtown is to use that P&T corridor, which is really a special place. There's amazing geology and really interesting topography. And it's really much more of a place than a lot of the other trails in the area are. So we really think that this could be kind of the crown jewel of the circuit trails. You'll see in our map that we also thought about using this project to connect the existing East Branch Brandywine Circuit Trail with the Struble Trail through Downingtown to sort of make Downingtown a hub of trails in Chester County. And the next slide shows what is really exciting about the possibility of this trail, which is that the Philadelphia and Thorndale line goes over the Downingtown trestle, which you may have seen as you're driving on 322 south of Downingtown. It crosses the Brandywine Creek in 322. And it's this 1/4 mile long trestle bridge that's 100 feet in the air. And it could be a really exciting place. And we do think that preliminarily it could be feasible to make something like this happen. So you've probably been hearing for several years that Norfolk Southern was planning to negotiate with PennDOT to transfer the whole P&T corridor to PennDOT because PennDOT needed a small portion of it for expansion of the parking lot at Exton train station. And we expect that transfer to happen very soon. I know we've been saying that for a long time, but the COVID situation has slowed everything down. And so we're expecting that transfer to happen very soon. And we are, having internal discussions about what it might look like for the county to develop a trail on that corridor. So next slide, please. Continuing with the Chester Valley Trail, we also completed a study in 2018 for what we call the Chester Valley Trail West. And it's really thought of as more of a connector trail between these two larger trail systems. One that goes from Harrisburg to the Chester County line all the way through Lancaster County. And that includes the Northwest Lancaster County River Trail, which is many miles of it are already complete, as well as the Enola Low-Grade Trail, which is a rail trail that will be about 30 miles long when it's done, going from roughly Columbia to Acklen in Chester County. And so the Chester Valley Trail West is about a 20-mile corridor that includes both multi-use trails and bicycle lanes and other on-road connections to create connectivity between these two larger trail systems. The other to the east, obviously being the Chester Valley Trail and its connection to Philadelphia and to Reading and points beyond. So that project was a big project, and it was divided into 9 phases. And if you could go to the next slide, one of the first phases that was identified is the westernmost portion that would connect to the Enola low-grade trail, which is anticipated to be complete in the next couple years. So we didn't want the trail to just stop at Acklen when it gets to the county line. So this project would bring the Enola low-grade trail into Acklen and close to Parksburg, actually, for about 2 miles along the former rail corridor that was the Enola low-grade line. And this is mostly on SEPTA's property. And so we've started conversations with SEPTA about potentially using this corridor for a trail. So we hope to get this project started in the next couple years. And next slide. And next I wanted to talk about the Struble Trail. So there hasn't been much going on the Struble Trail in a while, but it's one of the county's most loved trails. It's very scenic. Right now it's about 2.5 miles long from Downingtown to Dorland's Mill Road in Upper Euclid Township. And if you go to the next slide, in 2015, we worked with Brandywine Conservancy to do a feasibility study for extending the Struble Trail another 13.5 miles along the rail corridor that it currently follows. Former rail corridor, there's no more rail. And that would go all the way to Honeybrook. And that basically what that study found is that county ownership along the rail corridor varies. It's spotty in places. And the first priority that came out of that was developing the next 3.7 miles from the existing terminus of the trail at Dorland's Mill Road through Marsh Creek State Park to Marshall Road. And that's called segment A on this map. And so we've already started doing that. And if you go to the next slide, this map sort of shows the 3 different projects, or 2 of the 3 that comprise that 3.7 mile segment. So the red solid line in the lower right-hand side of the screen is the existing Struble Trail and the parking area at Dorland's Mill Road. And so we are in the final stages of getting design approval. The design is complete for a 600 linear foot extension of the Struble Trail that would take the trail across Dorland's Mill Road and connect it to the existing trail system in Marsh Creek State Park, which lots of people are already making that connection, but it would make it a lot safer and formalize the trail. So we're hoping that construction might start on that project later this year, but there's some issues that are pending with it. So it might be more likely that it would start early next year, but it is very soon in trail terms. And the white line that you see connecting to that dashed red line is the Struble Trail Extension Phase 1. And so that is 1.1 miles from the Marsh Creek State Park line to Reed's Road. And we are planning to start engineering for this project this year and hope that that will just continue on through and that we won't have too many issues, but that could potentially be constructed in 2023-ish. And then a little bit further down the road, which is just off the map, would be the 2.5 mile extension to Marshall Road, which we would look to start in the next 2 years or so in terms of design. So if you could go to the next slide. So Tim mentioned the DeVault Trail. So it's really exciting that there might be some things starting to happen with the DeVault Trail. But I wanted to share with you just a little bit of update on the Warner Spur and DeVault Trails. So These are highlighted in orange, and they would create not only a connection between Phoenixville and Great Valley, which would be a great commuting corridor. It's sort of the perfect commuting distance. But also it would create an internal loop within the circuit. So connecting the Schuylkill River Trail to the Chester Valley Trail. So that would have really high recreational value. So if you could go to the next slide. This is just a diagrammatic map of the Warner Spur. And this is owned by Tredyffrin Township for the most part. And it's about a two mile long rail corridor that once connected a limestone quarry where the Atwater development is now. Aerial is a little bit old and lots has happened in that area since then, to the Chester Valley Trail, which was once the Chester Valley Railroad. So we completed with a consultant team a feasibility study master plan for converting this corridor into a multi-use trail. And we worked with a big team of stakeholders and determined that this project would actually be pretty expensive to construct and might make the most sense to construct in conjunction with or after the Duval Trail is developed. I mean, it would certainly have a lot of value connecting the Atwater development, which is a big residential and employment center, to the Chester Valley Trail. But because of the big price tag, you know, it might make more sense as part of a bigger project. So that's the Warner Spur. And on the next slide, we have a picture of the DeVault Trail, courtesy of our friend Bob Thomas, who did the feasibility study in 2015 for the DeVault Trail, which is about a 6 mile long former rail corridor, current rail corridor, I guess technically. But the study found that this trail would be a really desirable connection on the circuit. It's fairly feasible to develop. One of the biggest issues is just that the corridor is owned by Norfolk Southern Rail Company currently. And so getting the access to the rail corridor and getting it for a reasonable price might be one of the biggest hurdles. So next slide, please. And lastly, I believe we wanted to talk to you about a project that is currently underway, which is a feasibility study for establishing a circuit trail in southern Chester County. And this project came out of Landscapes 3, where we heard that there was a lot of desire for trails in southern Chester County, but you can see from the map that there really isn't a circuit trail or much in the way of multi-use trails at all in southern Chester County, aside from the planned Kennett Greenway. So we are about halfway through a study to determine whether there is a feasible alignment for a continuous multi-use trail that goes roughly between Oxford and Chadds Ford to connect the population centers that are along the Route 1 corridor and Baltimore Pike. And if you go to the next slide, we've identified some preliminary alignments, and this just kind of shows you roughly what we've found so far through a mix of working with our steering committee, hearing a little bit from the public. And what we've found is that there definitely are opportunities for multi-use trails, but unlike places where there are, old railroad corridors or utility rights of way that provide a long unbroken stretch of property that can be acquired or used that's owned by a public entity, that's not really the case here. And if you go to the next slide, this shows the right-of-way analysis that we did for those trails. And so the green is trails that could be within the PennDOT's Route 1 right-of-way. So we did look at that as a potential option for creating a continuous multi-use trail along this corridor. We also looked at Baltimore Pike, which is just south of the Route 1 corridor, so south of that green line. And a lot of that is yellow. So we think that a significant amount of trail could be within the public right-of-way. But especially in the eastern part of the study area, a lot of the alignments that we found would be within a private property. And so, as you see those red areas, that becomes significantly less feasible because obviously of having to negotiate with every single property owner. So we have a public meeting coming up, if you could go to the next slide, where we're really looking to hear from people about what they think of a trail that goes through the Route 1 right-of-way. We don't know if it would be feasible from PennDOT's perspective. They are working on reconstructing the whole Route 1 bypass between the Maryland line and roughly Kennett Square, a little bit east of there. So and we've had some conversations with them about the project, and that may be something we're thinking about. But before we have any further conversations, we want to hear whether people are actually interested in a trail that goes along Route 1. We also want to hear from people what they think about some of the trails that we're showing on private property, because if there's no public buy-in for those trails, then they're certainly not feasible, and it's not something we want to further explore. But we will be looking to get as much input as we can through both a public survey that's currently open that any of you could take, that's on our project website, or you are welcome to join our public meeting, which will be on July 14th in the evening on Zoom. And so we'll be wrapping this study up by the end of the year and coming up with a draft recommended alignment probably sometime in September is our goal. And so then we'll have some more time for public input on what we've come up with as if there is a feasible route that's found, which we're hoping there will be, but at this point, who knows? So I believe that's it. If you could go to the next slide. Tim, it looks like it's time for a poll. That's what that graphic is telling me.
I went, and I have to take myself off of mute for this. We do have the final poll question here. Let me pull that up for everybody and we'll launch it here. Which benefits of the trails should trail projects focus on for communities in Chester County? We do have transportation, conservation, recreation, education, physical health, environmental health, tourism, and economic prosperity. So please take the time and fill out that as we go through. We did have a couple of questions that came in during the presentation, so I can give you some updates. Let me see if I can bring Randy Waldemeyer in. Randy can address here. Randy, you can address the Route 100 trail crossing and traffic light timing.
Yeah, you got me there, Tim?
I do.
Oh, great. Yeah, the question was with respect to the trail crossing, TPD, traffic planning design. We're the West Whitelands traffic engineer. So we TPD designed the side path, the one that Rachel noted is under construction, connecting the Exton train station to the trail. Another firm was designing the trail, the intersection crossing, but then as noted, the two concepts were combined for the bidding of them. But through that, we've worked with the county, and yes, the signalization of the Commerce Drive Route 100 intersection will be updated so as to give appropriate timing for trail users crossing 100 and Commerce.
Great, thank you, Randy, for that. And then Randy, you also pointed out we're very fortunate that there is a project similar to the 322 bridge. You had mentioned the Safe Harbor Trestle in Lancaster County is going to construction this year. So there's an example of this actually going to be happening, and a reason why we need to continue to push forward with our bridge in Chester County. Randy, you're still on mute.
If you're not familiar with that bridge, throw it in the Google after this, Safe Harbor Trestle. And in fact, it's a taller and bridge than even the Downingtown Trestle, and it happens to be on a curve. It's a massive structure. It happens to be on the state's. It was the top trail gap in the whole state, according to the DCNR's strategic plan. But it does speak to, there was some strong municipal and county leadership to move that forward. But it was built at the exact same time, the same project that the Downingtown Trestle was built. So from a constructability and a rehab perspective, I think that's encouraging for the prospects of someday rehabbing the Downingtown Trestle.
Great. Thank you, Randy, for that. I did get another a question in that I think Sarah and Brian need to respond to. How are municipalities in the county making it safer and more appealing to access multi-use trails by bicycle than rather having to drive to trailheads? And then that is, what safe bicycling improvements are being made on the city, county, and state roads that give access to the circuit trail network? And if Brian and Sarah, you could take yourself off from mute and maybe answer that question.
Sure. Brian, do you want to go first, or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I think there are a number of municipalities in our region that are looking to provide connector trails to the Chester Valley Trail. I know East Whiteland Township is one of them. They've had they have planning efforts to identifying alignments and have submitted some applications to our funding programs, particularly the DVRPC's Regional Trails Program funded by William Penn Foundation. I believe they have one of those was approved in the last round, which would provide a direct connector trail from a residential development that that abuts the Chester Valley Trail, and a direct connection. We've also seen a number of land developments adjacent to the Chester Valley Trail where they have internal trail systems that are proposed to provide direct connections to the trails. From the on-road perspective, we and other members across the region are participating in DVRPC's. I can't remember the specific name of it, but it's basically working with the PennDOT and the resurfacing program to identify opportunities to create bike lanes and other on-road bicycle facilities as part of the resurfacing. Essentially what happens is we will review what plans may be on the books with each municipality, and identify see if they've identified any connections, and then see if that's workable within the resurfacing project. PennDOT will review it from a design perspective to make sure everything is safe. And the municipality then also enters in an agreement for the maintenance of not the roadway, but the signage, pavement markings and striping, et cetera, to make this a possibility. So that is something, from PennDOT's perspective, they've recently updated the bicycle occupancy permit to remove the roadway maintenance portion of that, and hopefully to encourage more municipalities to take advantage of that opportunity.
I would just add that that's a really significant way for municipalities to improve connections to the trails, because most of the roads in our state roads, not all, but many, and so getting into the process of figuring out when a road is being resurfaced and grabbing any opportunity to improve the road, calm it, add low-cost safety features and such as bike lanes would really help improve the connectivity within that municipality directly to the trail. And I think I would just say with my advocacy hat on, that PennDOT could do more to ease that process with municipalities and make it even less bureaucratic. We're getting there. We've got over a huge hurdle a few years ago, but the more that this can become seamless and part of just the regular doing business is really important.
Great, thank you. Rachel, I did have a follow-up. As people want to learn more about the Southern Trail study, do you have a link that you can provide us so that we can share that out in our Monday morning memo with everybody?
I do, and I can put it in the chat too.
Okay, great. Yeah, make sure that goes to the chat to all. And then I guess one of the other questions that was asked are there efforts going on for the bike ped connection between Malvern Borough and the CVT? And my answer is I don't believe there are any conversations at this point. Brian or Rachel?
Not to my knowledge. I know there was some investigation into that a number of years ago, but I don't think that there's been any recent movement. I think that was one of the Patriot Path recommendations to provide that connection. But again, I haven't heard anything recently. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think the last question that I'm going to ask here, because we're coming close to that magical hour here, is going to be to Sarah. And I don't know if Sarah, if you want to pass that off, but the question came in is there an update on the protected bike lane legislation?
Yes. I do have some good news. That the legislation that would allow parking protected bike lanes on to be legal and on state roads has passed the House, and it passed out of the Senate committee in February. And just 2 days ago, it had its second consideration on the floor, and it moved to the Appropriations Committee. So we'll see what happens if the Appropriations Committee, and it's luckily chaired by a sponsor of the bill. If it moves out of that committee next week, it could go to the floor for a vote right away. So cross your fingers, and we'll see what happens. So we'll see in the final hour. Maybe we'll get a lucky break. We'll see.
So as things develop, Sarah, on that, please let us know, and we can keep
Absolutely.
folks posted so that we can reach out to our respected legislative bodies here in Chester County to make sure that they hear our voice.
We will. We're watching it with hawk eyes.
Well, it is that magical hour. It's 9:02. Thank you very much for Brian O'Leary, Sarah Clark Stewart, Brian Styche, and Rachel for your presentations. Thank you, everybody, for being members of TMACC or considering your membership in TMACC. Please check us out. As you can see on the slide here, we do have our Monday morning memo, so please sign up on that. If you want more information about operations and things going on, tmac.org. And we are on social media posting various things of what we're reading, what we're seeing. We'd love to get your feedback, so please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And with that, thank you very much, everybody, and have a safe and happy weekend.